I knew my sister resented me, but I never imagined how far she'd actually take it until she shoved a birthday gift across the dinner table and laughed. A DNA test. "Maybe this will finally explain why you're someone else's mistake," she said, loud enough to freeze every fork in the room. I swallowed the humiliation, mailed the kit, and waited. Weeks later, our family's estate lawyer called asking for an urgent meeting about Claire Harrington. My mother went white. Diana stopped smiling. And in that moment, something cold settled in my chest. They already knew what I was about to discover. Most people think of family as somewhere safe to fall. Mine always felt more like a beautiful house with broken heating. Stunning from the street, unbearable once you were inside. Growing up in the Harrington home in Seattle, I learned early how to take up as little space as possible. I was the quiet one, the one who finished her homework without being reminded, the one who melted into the background so my mother wouldn't sigh and my sister wouldn't sneer. Diana moved through the world like she owned it. Loud, magnetic, dramatic in the best possible way, or at least that's how our mother saw it. She had this talent for walking into any room and immediately becoming its center. Our mother, Margaret, never questioned it. When Diana scraped by with average grades, she was well-rounded. When I brought home a perfect report card, Mom would blink like she'd briefly forgotten I existed and say, "Good, Claire. Can you start on the dishes?" By the time I turned 36, I'd built a calm, steady life far from all of it. Portland suited me. Quiet mornings, manageable routines, the kind of peace I never had as a child. I worked in corporate accounting. I wore soft colors. I tried not to dwell too much on the hollow feeling that came from spending a childhood being overlooked. Then my father, Robert Harrington, died. He had been the only real anchor in that house. Not a man of many words, but there was warmth in his small moments. A hand on my shoulder, a nod at my college graduation that told me he was proud even when he couldn't quite say it. I didn't know then that he had been carrying something heavy for a very long time. 3 months after the funeral, Mom insisted on a birthday dinner at the family home. Her voice over the phone was too cheerful, too rehearsed. When I arrived, the house smelled the same, lemon cleaner and old wood, but it felt hollowed out without Dad's quiet presence. Diana was already there, flipping through travel magazines, tan from some recent vacation, barely glancing up when I walked in. Mom kept refilling her wine glass without drinking much from it. Her fingers just traced slow circles around the stem, over and over. I tried to bring up the will, carefully, respectfully. Mom's smile went stiff. "We're just not ready," she said, but her eyes slid toward Diana, and Diana smirked like she was the only one in on the joke. Looking back, the dinner was never about my birthday. It was a setup. The tension crept in slowly, the way cold air sneaks under a door. Diana talked all through dinner, her new interior renovation, her husband's promotion, her upcoming trip abroad. Mom laughed at everything she said, even the parts that weren't funny. When I spoke, the conversation seemed to just drift past me like I hadn't said anything at all. Halfway through the meal, Diana looked over at me with that particular gleam she got when she was enjoying something she shouldn't. "So, Claire," she said sweetly, "still at the same firm?" Then immediately launched back into a story about herself. It wasn't a question, it was a reminder. When Mom got up to bring out dessert, a plain store-bought cake she hadn't even transferred to a real plate, Diana pushed back her chair and reached under the table for a silver-wrapped box. "I got you something," she said, sliding it toward me like she was presenting evidence. "I think you'll find it interesting." Mom's face drained. "Diana." Diana ignored her. I unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a DNA testing kit. The refrigerator hum was the only sound in the room. "Maybe this will finally explain why you never quite fit." Diana flinched. I saw it clearly, but she said nothing. Diana hadn't just insulted me, she'd let something slip that was never supposed to be said out loud. That night, alone in my old bedroom, walls still the pale green I'd picked at 14, I dug through boxes in the closet like someone searching for proof they were ever really there. At the very back, I found an envelope that didn't belong with the others. The dust around it looked recently disturbed. Inside was a photograph, a younger version of my mother, holding me as a baby, standing next to a man I had never seen before. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, "Forgive me." My hands were shaking when I photographed everything. Then I looked at the DNA kit sitting on my old desk. Diana had handed it to me like a weapon. She wanted me to use it. She wanted something to happen. Fine. I mailed it the next morning, not because Diana wanted me to, but because I needed to understand what truth she was so eager to detonate. The results came 5 weeks later on a quiet Wednesday morning. I was at my desk in Portland when the notification appeared. I expected panic. What came instead was something closer to quiet, devastating clarity. No biological relationship detected with the Harrington family. I kept reading. A suggested match to the Calloway lineage, a name I had never heard, suddenly tied to me by blood. It didn't shatter me the way I expected. It felt like confirmation of something I had always felt in the back of my chest, but never had words for. I had always been a guest in that house. When I sent the screenshot to the family group chat, no drama, just a simple, "Can someone explain this?" The responses came fast. Mom called within minutes, crying, not from guilt, from fear. "Grace, sweetheart, please just delete it. You don't understand. This was so long ago. We moved past it." She never apologized, not once. She just needed the secret buried again. Diana didn't call. She texted. 4 words. "Well, now you know." Cold, satisfied, like she'd been holding on to that moment for years. I called her that night, voice unsteady. "Why, Diana? Why do this? Why humiliate me in front of everyone?" She picked up on the 3rd ring, sighed like I was boring her. "Because I've carried this secret for over 20 years, she said. "Because Mom owed me. Because you've played the victim long enough. And now the right people are finally going to get what they actually deserve." She hung up. Those words wouldn't leave me alone. The next morning, I started asking quiet questions. Old neighbors, family friends, people who had known my parents before Diana and I existed. What I learned chilled me. Diana had been meeting with estate lawyers for months, hinting about upcoming changes, speaking about Dad's estate as though it were already hers. I needed real help. I hired an attorney, Rachel Moon, who specialized in complicated inheritance disputes. I brought her everything: the DNA results, the photograph, screenshots of Diana's messages. Rachel listened without expression, taking careful notes. "Your instincts are correct," she said finally. "This isn't just old resentment. Someone is actively working to push you out." 3 days later, Mr. Crawford, our family's longtime estate lawyer, called. He sounded unusually formal. "Claire, your father left very specific instructions for when and how the will would be read. Those conditions have now been met. I'd encourage you to come prepared." Prepared? I'm not sure anything could have prepared me for what came next. Denver was cold the morning of the reading. Not weather cold, the kind that settles into your bones and stays. Rachel and I arrived early. Floor-to-ceiling windows, dark wood paneling, the kind of room where the truth doesn't hide. It just echoes. Mom arrived, looking hollowed out, hair barely pinned back, both hands gripping her purse like a lifeline. She didn't look at me. She sank into a chair at the far end of the table and stared at the surface. Then Diana walked in, heels clicking against marble, cream blazer perfectly fitted. Her own attorney, someone I recognized from billboards, big reputation in estate litigation. She gave me a slow, lifted smile when she sat down. She thought she'd already won. Mr. Crawford entered last, carrying a thick folder. He placed it on the table and looked at each of us before speaking. James Harrington left explicit instructions for how today would proceed. He anticipated complications. Everything you are about to hear was prepared with full awareness of facts that some of you may find unexpected. Diana's smile flickered. Crawford opened the folder and began to read. I, Robert James Harrington, declare this my final will. I leave 70% of my estate, including the family home, investment accounts, and all related assets, to my daughter, Claire Harrington. The silence was absolute. Diana stood up. She is not his biological daughter. We have proof. She has no legal... Crawford raised one hand. Please sit. There is more. She sat, jaw clenched, eyes burning. I have known since Claire was 2 years old that she is not my biological child. I chose to raise her anyway. I leave her my legacy because she has proven every single year that she is worthy of it. This decision requires no further justification. Diana had gone gray. Mom pressed her eyes shut, but Crawford wasn't finished. 8 months before his death, my father had hired a private investigator to document any interference with his estate. What the investigator found was laid out on the table in a neat stack. Payments, withdrawals, billing records, meeting logs, all showing Diana's efforts to pressure Dad into changing the will, including unauthorized withdrawals of $47,000 during his final illness. Diana's attorney went rigid beside her. Crawford set down the last document, a handwritten note in my father's handwriting. He unfolded it and read it aloud. Diana, I know exactly what you've been doing. I watched you try to manipulate your mother. I hoped you would make different choices. These consequences belong entirely to you. A sound came out of Diana, half gasp, half something she couldn't name. Her attorney leaned toward her and said quietly, "Do not contest this. There is a no contest clause. You will lose everything." But Diana was already unraveling. "This is fraud," she said, voice shaking. "Claire manipulated a dying man. She tricked him." Rachel stood, calm and steady. The will explicitly documents Mr. Harrington's reasoning and full awareness of Claire's parentage. Any challenge would be considered frivolous, triggering the no contest clause, which would include repayment of all outstanding loans, roughly $195,000. "Those weren't loans. He gave me that money." "Not according to estate records," Crawford replied quietly. Mom finally spoke, barely a whisper. "Diana, stop." But Diana couldn't. "This should all be mine," she said, voice cracking. "I'm the real daughter. I'm the one who actually stayed." I stood slowly. My voice didn't shake. "You didn't stay, Diana. You controlled. You manipulated. You built your position in this family on secrets you had no right to carry." She turned to me, eyes wild. "You don't deserve any of..." Crawford cut in gently. "There is one more item." He opened a smaller envelope, my name on the front, in my father's writing. Inside, a short letter. "Claire, you spent your whole life thinking you were invisible. You were not. I watched your patience, your kindness, your integrity every single day. You were my daughter, not by blood, but by choice, which has always meant more to me. I leave you this with complete certainty that you will honor it well." My eyes blurred. When I looked up, Diana finally understood. This wasn't my victory. It was the consequence she'd been building toward for years, delivered by the man she had most underestimated. The legal fallout moved quickly. Diana's attorney withdrew the following morning. When she tried to contest the will regardless, the judge dismissed it within minutes. The no contest clause held. The $47,000 in unauthorized withdrawals became a formal debt owed back to the estate, with 1 year to repay it before further legal action. For the first time in my life, Diana looked small, not changed, just out of room to run. Mom came to see me in Portland 2 weeks later. She sat on my couch, hands folded in her lap, eyes red. She told me everything. The truth about my biological father, the agreement that was made, the guilt she had carried and never once addressed directly. I listened, but I didn't reach for her hand. "I want to make things right," she whispered. "I believe you, but making things right starts with letting me live without carrying your secrets for you." In the months that followed, I stepped back from Seattle entirely. I managed the estate carefully, settled every account, and, for the first time in my life, made decisions based entirely on what I actually wanted. It was the first time I'd done that without asking whose feelings it might hurt. I stayed in Portland, built a quieter, slower life where the old noise couldn't find me. Some endings aren't dramatic. Sometimes the ending is just, finally, choosing yourself. And if you've ever been the one who was passed over, looked through, or made to feel like you didn't quite belong, hear this. You deserved better than the people who failed to see you. Drop your story in the comments and subscribe for what comes next.